Well, the Public Service and Commercial Union is calling on workers to help arrest those behind cable theft. It says organised labour should come together, irrespective of affiliation, to end infrastructure vandalism. The union believes protecting infrastructure will curb unnecessary job losses. So, for more on this, we're now joined by Tahir Maepa from the union to take us through this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Tahir, and good morning to you. I think let's start with the cost to the economy and maybe even quantify it, if we may, just to get a better sense of the reality here of how much as a country are losing due to these cable theft and vandalism. How much have you quantified that cost to economy to be?
Well, according to the estimates, and these are estimates because there's a lot of these that are not necessarily quantified, but the country is losing billions due to this cable theft and infrastructure looting and so forth. And that in itself, it puts a burden on the economy and on the government on twofold. In terms of the private sector, obviously, the private sector will not invest more into the country to create more jobs if this lawlessness is not kept. But in terms of the state as well, the government has made promises to the country for infrastructure development. Now, the money that is supposed to be going into infrastructure development is now going into fixing this infrastructure looting and cable theft, which cost us billions. So that in itself, it takes the country backwards in terms of development. But most importantly, it really affects the possibility of job creation and sustaining the current jobs.
Now, with that being said, you're making a plea here to members, to workers, to South Africans to add this to their New Year's resolutions, to actually, in the new year, be a part of those who actually hold those responsible for cable theft and vandalism accountable, right?
Absolutely. Our role as workers, as trade unions, cannot only be confined to the workplace. We need to make sure that these criminals, they stay with us in our communities. And in many instances, we know who they are. And we cannot continue allowing this kind of lawlessness continuing under our watch. And as workers, we have a responsibility to assist the state, to assist the police in making sure that we bring these people to book. And by so doing, we are really making life easier for all of us. We are calling on all workers, irrespective of affiliation, that we need to take the bull by its horn. We need to confront these thieves. We need to shut down these institutions that melt these stolen cables in our communities. They should not operate in our communities because by allowing it to continue as business as usual, we as workers, we suffer the consequences.
Tahir, what would your response be to someone who says this? And I've heard this so many times, that this could be a very dangerous exercise. There seems to be, a every man for himself, God for us all mentality, that I don't want to get involved. The best I can do maybe is take a video and, show you what I saw. But as far as being involved in holding someone accountable, even arresting them as a citizen, as you've also suggested in your statement, taking them to the police station, reporting information, being a key witness in what I saw, that could be dangerous for my life. How would you then suggest that issue of one being afraid for themselves in turn of, holding these criminals accountable, how would you suggest that we address that?
Well, look, we're at a crossroads. We have a choice to allow this to continue and we perish, or we risk our lives for purposes of making sure that we move this country forward. I grew up in Soshanguve, and in the 80s, when I was still a teenager, we never relied on police to deal with criminality. We as a community, we made sure that in our community, there is no such things happening, whether it be rape, abuse of women, or thieving. We dealt with it as a community, and we need to go back to those days. And I'm not calling on people to take the law into their own hands, but the law empowers us as citizens to arrest criminals and bring them to book. And we cannot always blame the police and say that the police are not doing their work, but we are the ones who are suffering. If a cable is stolen, Mfundo, me and you were the ones without electricity. If the railway line is stolen, it is us who have to pay more for our transportation. And if that is not enough for us to say that we need to be courageous and take this bull by this horn and indeed put our lives at risk for a better future, let it be. But if we are going to sit back and say that, look, I don't want to get involved, then we'll in any case perish, we'll lose our jobs, our children will never have job opportunities, there will never be development in this country. This country is going to be a mess, and we don't want to get to that point. What we are saying is that we can stop it. And 2023 is that opportunity that we say that, you know what, we are going to be active citizens. We are going to make sure that we contribute towards the prosperity of our country.
And also, I mean, I'm sure South Africans would agree that it's not only those directly stealing the cable, directly vandalizing the infrastructure. There are syndicates, there are masterminds. There is definitely a bigger source and problem that perhaps is in a white collar, somewhere in a cushy home, that is sending out all these foot soldiers on the ground to cause this damage. How would you then suggest working alongside law enforcement to get to the root problem and not just the foot soldiers?
Absolutely. What needs to happen is that we need to stop the supply. And once we arrest these people who are doing the actual work of stealing the cables and vandalizing the infrastructure, we can be able to, the police will make the police much easier to do the investigation. And the other side of the coin is also us as citizens, as workers. When we are on strikes, we are angry because of whatever beef that we have with our employers. It is not wise for us to destroy infrastructure, because what are we doing? We are basically not different from being common criminals. We are also contributing to the very same thing that makes us to suffer. So we need to stop the supply. And if there's no supply, these cushy guys who are the white-collar criminals, who are in fact the real beneficiaries of this, will not be able to benefit. But at least the police will have people to point where these syndicates lie.
Perhaps share a warning with us this morning, Tahir. Should South Africans, workers at large, not heed your call? Should we, as South Africans, continue to allow the damage of infrastructure, the vandalism we've seen? I mean, we were all perplexed when we read stories reported even right here on ENCA of how Chris Hani Baragwanath, you know, one of the biggest hospital, most important, significant hospitals in the Gauteng province and in the greater South African region, being vandalized, being sabotaged. This all due to cable theft, where patients in the ICU had to be moved. These are people fighting for their lives. Healthcare workers couldn't work. Now we're seeing the extent that, you know, cable theft has now it's at an evil point of no return. Should your call not be heeded, what's to come of this country?
Exactly. You know, the example that you just made now about Chris Hani Baragwanath, it's a typical example. Who goes into those hospitals? These are our families. These are our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, and our fathers, and our grandparents. They are the ones who are going to die. They are the ones who are going to suffer due to these kinds of activities by these particular criminals. And what we are saying is that if we don't, we will all suffer the consequences. And we are already suffering the consequences. But I'm saying that we can stop this from continuing to the point of no return. And for us to be able to stand up as workers, as communities, and say that enough is enough, this is not going to happen under our watch. We are going to go after these people. We are going to make sure that they are brought to book, and we are going to make sure that where we are working is not happening. But if we don't, firstly, we will lose jobs as workers, because there is no way that government can continue, for instance, paying people who are just sitting around and doing nothing because of somebody has vandalized infrastructure. And our children who are matriculating on a year-to-year basis will never be able to get opportunities of jobs because of government will not invest into infrastructure development, whereupon our children will be able to be employed. So the effect of this goes right into our bedrooms. So if we are not going to stand up and do something, we are definitely going to perish. And unfortunately, we as the PSCU and myself as the Secretary General of the PSCU, we are not going to sit back and allow that to happen. But we are saying we cannot do it by ourselves. We are calling on all workers from all federations. Let's put our hands together and deal with these criminals. They cannot defeat a nation.
Yeah. I want to also discuss our image internationally. You've mentioned investments, private investments being at risk here. Who would want to invest in a country that does not have law and order? Who would want to invest in a country where I come and I invest in infrastructure, but then within a couple of months or even perhaps close to a year, all my efforts are down the drain? How does that look for South Africa outside? To those perhaps who are keen in investing in the country, but are looking at the events and they're looking at how South Africa and South Africans are dealing with crime, because we can't avoid crime. Crime is everywhere. It's how a country takes charge when there's criminal activity that perhaps inspires, confidence that I can invest in a country like this, because when there's a criminal activity, there's a sense of urgency to deal with it. How does it look in terms of our public image overseas and outside, the country?
Our public image is ruined. South Africa was a beacon of hope for the rest of Africa. There was law and order. Things were working. People, like you're saying, criminality will always be there. But the extent in which the criminal elements are operating, they are operating in impunity. It's like they are not afraid of anything. And obviously, I don't expect anybody coming from abroad to come and throw their money into a ditch here in South Africa. But what is even worse, Mfundo, is that even South African business people are no longer investing in this country. They are taking their money elsewhere because of, firstly, they are not guaranteed electricity. Secondly, they are not guaranteed safety. Thirdly, there is no possibility of them recovering whatever that they've invested in the country. We all know, in as much as we as unions, we are there to make sure that we secure prosperity for our members. But capitalism is about making profit. And if they are not making profit, they are not going to invest. And what we are saying is that we have a responsibility to say that where we agree with employers, and criminality is one of those things, we need to work together with them and make sure that we eradicate this criminality so that we can make investors to come back into our beloved country so that our country can move forward. But as it stands now, I don't expect anybody to bring their money into the country that looks like this. We are in the worst position ever in the history of this country.
And with the rates at which, in terms of unemployment, poverty, that is a blow. That is taking us backwards. Tahir Maepa, the Secretary General of the Public Service and Commercial Union, thank you so much for your time this morning. All right, still to come.